Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Real and the Rare. My name is Scott Morganroth, the Motor City Madmouth, and yes, you can see me, and you can see my co-host, Xavier McKnight. Long time no talk. At least tonight we get to do it visually.
Yes, that's correct, and we hope that everybody's enjoying this Zoom format that we're using with these shows. I mean, it's really been a breath of fresh air. We get to see each other's faces. We get to give you all our facial reactions and really give you guys some more insight on who we are as people and as analysts as we continue to do this great show that we do here on the WSAN network.
Oh, I can't wait to see when we go back to Bradenton so that we can go out there and go back to Culver's. My goodness, I miss that spot, man. I
Most
really
definitely.
do. So with that said, let's get this broadcast going here, and we'll start off with the Milwaukee Bucks and the Miami Heat about ready to tip off. I believe they're underway, but they're playing tonight nevertheless. And we'll talk about Giannis Antetokounmpo. Is he a Supermax player, Xavier? Because he didn't impress me a whole lot so far in the series. Goes for 4 of 12 in Game 1, and then obviously in Game 2 commits a very costly foul, and now the Bucks are in a very big 2-0 hole. And if history has anything to do with what's going on with the Bucks, okay, this team is 0-14 when they're trailing 2-0, and guess what? They're in that same predicament against the Miami Heat team that you better not take lightly. So what are your thoughts, X-Man?
He's a Supermax player in the regular season. In the postseason, he hasn't proven that yet. You can't take anything away from what he's accomplished in the regular season. He's going to more than likely be a 2-time league MVP. He's the reigning league MVP. He's also the defensive player of the year. But when I look at what he's done in these playoffs, in particular in this series right now with Miami, I'm not impressed at all. I'm very disappointed. As a matter of fact, it's reminding me of how LeBron James played in the 2010 playoffs versus the Boston Celtics in those semifinals. Those are the type of vibes I'm picking up about Giannis right now. And another thing, Scott, I really didn't like what he had to say after Game 1 when people were asking him, the media was asking him, well, why didn't you guard Jimmy Butler? And he had to say, I guard who the coach tells me to guard. No. What you do in that sense, if you are an alpha dog, if you are really that guy, you go to the coach and you tell him, I got him. I got 22. I got Jimmy Butler. If we lose this game, it's going to be because I'm defending Jimmy Butler as hard as I can, and he's still hitting shots. But I am taking control of that. I want their biggest dog in the yard going up against our biggest dog in the yard. That's just how I feel about that. So I was really disappointed with what he had to say in regards to that after Game 1.
Well, there comes a point when you're a superstar player, you have got to take control over the situation. All the great ones do. Listen, you know what? They always say that the coach is going to go first and the players stick around. And again, the Bucks are trying to make it worth his while to stick around, but an early exit will not help matters any over the next year or two. Giannis will wonder, can I win in Milwaukee? And that's a message that they have to convince him that he can. I'm not blaming Chris Middleton this time around or Eric Bledsoe. This is on Giannis, okay? Commits a costly foul, can't make any foul shots. I mean, come on, seriously.
Yeah, just really bad decision-making on his part there. Him only taking 12 shots in Game 1. That's also another no-no. It's like
right.
You're supposed to be possibly a 2-time reigning league MVP, and you're only taking 12 shots in the game. I don't want to hear this is how Coach draws the plays up. I don't want to hear that this is how Coach Budenholzer does this, Coach Budenholzer does that. Michael Jordan once told Doug Collins when Doug Collins was hired as head coach of the Chicago Bulls, when you have a thoroughbred, you better let them run. That is the type of attitude I want to see from guys like Giannis. If you really are a superstar, take control. You can step to the coach when you play at the level that he plays at. So I'm not understanding this, I do what the coach tells me to do. No, you go take control of Jimmy Butler. You step to the coach and you tell him, I'm a thoroughbred. You let me run, and we're going to go as far as I take us, and everybody else get on my back as I take the lead on this thing. That is what I want to see from Giannis.
That makes two of us. All right, enough of the Milwaukee Bucks. You want to talk about Steve Nash? Is he a good hire for the Brooklyn Nets?
I believe he is a good hire for the Brooklyn Nets simply for the relationship that he has with Kevin Durant that goes back to Kevin Durant's days in Golden State. He's very fond of Kyrie Irving. I've heard that they have a relationship as well, probably not as deep and personal as the one that he has with Kevin Durant, but this was clearly a hire that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving signed off on. And I believe it's going to work out just fine. But I'm going to ask you this question.
Sure.
We heard these rumors for months about Greg Popovich, them possibly wanting to lure in Greg Popovich and have him come be the head coach of that team. Do you believe that those rumors were real, or do you believe that that was a smokescreen that they set up in place of what they were doing behind the scenes with Steve Nash that nobody knew about?
None of the above. None of the above. Why would a guy like Popovich go to Brooklyn? You tell me. No, none of the above. Period. I don't buy it.
Well, no, what I'm asking is, do you buy that they were interested in him, not necessarily him being interested in them?
No, I'll say what I just said. No,
Okay.
I don't. I think it's a smokescreen, like you said. Right now, you want a younger coach to relate to these players. And you got a guy like Steve Nash, who I don't care if he has any coaching experience. He's always been a leader on the court anyways, and his play spoke for itself. He's been around a lot of good coaches anyways over the years, so this is a good opportunity. Sometimes, even though you have a guy who doesn't have head coaching experience, doesn't mean you're not going to have a good assistant coach or two on the bench. Remember, there is room on the bench for assistant coaches, so I don't put a lot of stock in that. I'll say what I just said. No.
And you talk about Steve Nash being the right fit for this. You look at the Brooklyn Nets current roster, and it's very similar to a lot of those Phoenix Suns teams that Steve Nash played on. They have a lot of shooters on that team. Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, Spencer Dinwiddie, Karis LeVert, Joe Harris. This is the perfect situation, and he can really fill out that offense very nicely. I mean, I'm really looking forward to seeing if he's going to run some 7 seconds or less type of things that Mike D'Antoni ran in Phoenix as well when Steve Nash was there as the point guard and the lead catalyst on that team. But I'm really excited for Steve Nash. But one other thing I want to say in regards to this before we move on to the next topic, I want people out there to understand that the Steve Nash hire in Brooklyn is not a form of white privilege. This is a form of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving. They signed off on this. They wanted this. They probably went to management and endorsed for this to happen in the first place, because when I saw that notification yesterday, it's almost like it slapped me in the back of the head. Like it came out of absolutely nowhere, completely out of left field. Now, I'll give you a form of white privilege in the NBA that could possibly happen within the next few weeks. Okay. Nate McMillan being fired as the head coach of the Indiana Pacers after his team competed and played hard, and they were shorthanded against the Miami Heat. They competed in all 4 of those games. They competed harder in those games than we're watching the Bucks compete against them right now.
Right.
And what we're hearing is the person who they want to replace him as the lead candidate if he's fired from his job in Houston is Mike D'Antoni. Now, to me, that is a form of white privilege because Mike D'Antoni has won nothing in this league. But he continues to get job after job after job, and he continues to choke in the playoffs. I don't get it.
I don't buy that one. No, you and I are way off on that. I think what Indiana wants is an offensive coach. That's what they want. I don't buy that one at all. No way. If you're referring to that white privilege with Stephen A. Smith, okay, from what I've heard, I think that Stephen's way out of line here. Let's keep white out of the whole thing. I'm not buying that, period, okay? As far as D'Antoni, maybe a change of scenery in Indiana isn't the worst thing in the world. Again, it depends on what type of offense they're running and the talent level that you have around them. So I'm not going to buy that. If Indiana wants D'Antoni, I'm okay with it. And I actually, when you talk about Steve Kerr with Golden State, I don't think that Nash hiring has a pedigree, but I can see it comparably paying dividends because the common denominator in that is Kevin Durant. He's played for Kerr, and now he's going to have the opportunity to pay for Steve Nash. I'm okay with that, so I'm not going to go that far. No way. Not tonight. Not ever. Now, I love the fact that you brought up Michael Jordan and Doug Collins. I mean, that to me is a great analogy. You always come up with one. And Doug Collins is the one guy who I actually worked with in Detroit for a period of time when I was covering the Pistons. And I love Coach Collins, his intensity, and the heart that this guy has. And I've learned a lot from a lot of coaches that I've covered in the NBA for sure. So that's an excellent comparison. But no, I don't care about this white privilege business. Sorry, Xavier, I'm not buying it. Stephen A. Smith, okay, I'll give you him. He's been around the NBA a while. He knows about basketball, okay, very knowledgeable. He's one of those types of individuals where, he's a credible source. He certainly knows the league better than anybody. There's a pulse. But to be able to go off of white privilege in a predominantly African-American sport where you have a lot of players and coaches. Sorry, bro, Xavier. That's not hockey. We're not talking baseball or football. We're talking the NBA. So let's move on to John Morant, 2019-20 NBA Rookie of the Year. Definitely deserved it for sure. Zion Williamson started playing too late in the game, and John Morant can build himself a great name with the Memphis Grizzlies. Fine pick by them, and I can only see nothing but good things for the Grizzlies.
Yeah, the NBA voters, they completely got this one right. Not just with John Morant being named the Rookie of the Year, but with Kendrick Nunn finishing second and Zion Williamson finishing third. Zion didn't play enough games to me for him to finish second, and for him to even be brought up in that conversation over Kendrick Nunn, to me, was disrespectful in the first place. We've seen what Kendrick Nunn's been doing in Miami all season long. It's been very impressive. It's been a big part of why the Miami Heat have been one of the biggest surprise stories in the Eastern Conference this year. So kudos to the voters for getting this thing 100% right.
John Morant represents the future of the league. And I'm happy that he's going to do it in Memphis. They got it right. Nothing more to say. They got it right. All right. Let's talk about a guy who I really have a lot of respect for, and that's Chris Paul. I was really hoping that the Oklahoma City Thunder were going to actually beat the Houston Rockets. That might have signaled the beginning of D'Antoni right there. They had Westbrook. They had Harden, guys that can't play defense anyways. And Chris Paul, to me, has a heart of a lion. He could play in any era. And after when I watched this guy play the other day, you know, he may be late in the game to get a statue in Oklahoma City. But remember, he did play in Oklahoma City when New Orleans was displaced there for a while. So it's not like those folks in Oklahoma City hadn't seen him. So, but I do believe, and I've seen more basketball than you have, that Chris Paul could play in any era, the current NBA or the old NBA. He is a true point guard in every sense of the word. What are your thoughts about the performance that Chris Paul nearly pulled off the unbelievable upset, and Oklahoma City had a much better season coached by Billy Donovan than most people anticipated?
Well, they proved the doubters wrong all season long. Many people didn't even give them much of a chance to make the playoffs at all. I was one of those people that didn't give them much of a chance to make the playoffs, because the last time I saw Chris Paul in Houston before going to Oklahoma City, he looked like a complete shell of himself. He was often injured with those hamstring injuries. He was very much hampered. But I'm very happy for Chris Paul, because he's been one of my favorite players to watch in this league for over a decade now, and glad that he was able to come back and have this bounce back season he had. I was really rooting for Oklahoma City to win this series as well, even though I picked Houston to win it. I was rooting for Oklahoma City to win it. Just a nice, good underdog, feel-good story there. Chris Paul, a road to redemption type story. And I appreciate the way that he's used his platform as well to bring awareness to social injustice and police brutality, and all of the love that he's shown to historically Black college universities on a night in, night out basis since he's been down there in the bubble. He's represented paraphernalia or school names of HBCUs ever since he's been down in the bubble. So I appreciate him for doing that as well. But I was definitely rooting for him to get this series win, because I'm just not a fan of how James Harden basically was the lead catalyst and pushing him out of the back door in Houston, making him look like the main problem.
Right.
Meanwhile, if James Harden doesn't come up with that defensive play in Game 7, what we're having a conversation about right now is James Harden choked in the big moment once again.
Well, all I can tell you is James Harden, Russell Westbrook will be out against the Lakers, period. And that leads me to my segue here. We'll talk about the Lakers and the Houston Rockets. I consider it Mike D'Antoni's last hurrah playing small ball. I've never believed in the small ball philosophy. I just think that the Houston Rockets are way overmatched against the Los Angeles Lakers. And I don't even give this series maybe 5 games. Maybe if they're lucky to get a game, but no, 5 games max. I'd like to see the Lakers get rid of them in 4. What about you?
I believe it's actually going to go 6 games, just because I believe that there are going to be a few games where James Harden will put in some high-scoring performances. Russell Westbrook at times will be difficult to stop. I actually believe the Rockets are going to win this game tonight, because what we've seen in the past few years with LeBron James-led teams is he likes to use game ones as fill-out games. And I feel like tonight he's going to use this as a fill-out game to really feel, okay, where do I need to put my imprint in at the most point in the series? But the Lakers will win this series in 6 games. I believe it could go 5. I'm going to say that it's going to go 6. Just simply because the small ball thing, it doesn't work to me either, but Houston does a really good job of doing it. Now, one thing I will say, Anthony Davis and JaVale McGee are going to be a lot different than Nerlens Noel and Steven Adams. And I'm actually very disappointed in Steven Adams, Scott, because I thought he was going to be one of the main difference makers in that first round series with Oklahoma City and Houston, and he turned out not to be. So I'm disappointed in him there. But Anthony Davis and JaVale McGee and Dwight Howard, they're going to do their job. They're going to show up, and the Lakers will get rid of the Rockets in 6 games.
Well, I'm going to say 5, so that's okay for us to disagree. I'm okay with that. And if I'm wrong, it won't be the first time, it won't be the last time. So with that said, why don't we go back to Northern California? I want to talk about the fact that the Sacramento Kings furloughed a handful of basketball operations staff, the support roles in the G League staff. That doesn't include the front office, the analytics, or the scouting positions. But Joe Dumars was named the Kings interim vice president of basketball operations last month, replacing longtime GM Vlade Divac and assistant GM Peja Stojakovic, who stepped down. So do you think that Joe Dumars would really want this job full-time, and will he be offered it? It's a two-sided question.
Well, should he want it? If I'm him, I don't want it, but I know about the history of Joe Dumars. He's had to always go out and get everything the harder way.
Right.
Nothing's ever been handed to him. So he likes to embrace challenges. And taking on this role with a dysfunctional organization like the Sacramento Kings would be a challenge. And I believe he would actually take this job, and I believe he would actually have a chance to do well with it if ownership can stay out of this way. Because when you look at the Sacramento Kings, they got a lot of talent there. De'Aaron Fox, Buddy Hield. If Marvin Bagley III can stay healthy, they really have a chance to be one of the powerhouses in the West within the next few years, seriously, with all that talent they have. But as we know, sometimes as much talent as you have, it doesn't overcome the organizational dysfunction that you have in the front office and ownership. We're slowly seeing that right now with the Philadelphia 76ers. But Sacramento is a total different case of dysfunction than the Philadelphia 76ers.
Oh, yeah.
They have not been to the playoffs since 2006.
Right.
And they were expected to break that drought this year, but they did not. Maybe they can do it next year, but I believe Joe Dumars will take this job if he is indeed offered it, and I wish him all the best, because I know that he's going to do his best to put that team in the best position to win that he possibly can.
Well, I worked with him, so I know him better than anybody. Joe Dumars, unfortunately, his ending in Detroit wasn't very ceremonious, but bear in mind he's made some big mistakes drafting. Everybody knows about the gaffe that he made with Darko Milicic over Carmelo Anthony, how many titles that would have cost him. And, of course, he had the problem that I had with Joe is the instability in the coaching ranks for a guy where he shouldn't have done it. I hated when he fired Rick Carlisle. He's just lucky he had Larry Brown in his back pocket. Larry Brown made a career mistake when his dream job was in New York, and Bill Davidson gave him a $5 million check to hit the road, and Flip Saunders couldn't measure up to the expectations. So Joe Dumars' relationships with coaches pulling the quick trigger was a problem for him in Detroit. Does that change in Sacramento? I don't know. Depends on if he gets the job. But what are your thoughts about the fact that the Kings furloughed some people in their operations staff, even if it wasn't at a higher level, still within the organization at the G League level?
Well, you're very sad for those individuals, because you understand that we're in the midst of a pandemic right now, and the word furlough is used very loosely during these times right now, because businesses, they just can't make the money and the funds that they need to make to be able to pay everybody. Mm-hmm. Of course, this isn't a decision that the Sacramento Kings wanted to make, but their hand is kind of forced right now due to this pandemic. You hope that this is only a temporary furlough and that this doesn't end up being a permanent layoff for those individuals. And you wish them all the best and hope that they can do everything possible to get back on their feet as soon as possible.
Okay. Let's go on to another coaching search, and this one's in the city of brotherly love. Villanova's Jay Wright rules himself out of the 76ers head coaching search. And just so you know, that Wright's been the head coach for Villanova since 2001-2. He's 58 years of age, two-time champ since 2015 with a 472-182 mark in the regular season. 2 titles, as I mentioned, since 2015. So I don't know. I applaud the move by Jay Wright staying with the Villanova team. I really do. He's built. The only thing for him, there's a statue to be had over with Villanova. What are your thoughts about him staying in college?
I applaud him staying in college, too, in particular at Villanova. If he were to be hired as the Sixers head coach, it's something that the city would embrace at the moment. But if he goes in and he doesn't do the job that they expect for him to do, they're going to boot him out of town. We know what it is with Philly. They're called the city of brotherly love, but those fans don't show you any love when you're not doing what you're supposed to do by winning games.
Right.
And it's definitely the right move by Jay Wright to do this with that imbalanced situation that's going on over there in the Sixers organization right now. You have two star players in Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid who don't really mesh very well with each other, and they don't necessarily have the best supporting cast around them now that they had a few years ago either. So it's best for him to stay with what he knows right now as opposed to going into that situation right now.
Well, do you think he's thinking about John Beilein, who probably wishes he stayed with the Michigan Wolverines?
Well, that definitely is probably playing a role in that as well. Even though, had John Beilein gone to a more functional organization, maybe he would have had some more success out of the gate. Right. We know that the Cleveland Cavaliers, without LeBron James in the Dan Gilbert era, we know what that equivalates to. Pure, total dysfunction, chaos, and nothing but failure whatsoever. So that factor is definitely playing a factor in there as well. But as I said earlier, and I just said just a few moments ago too, the Philadelphia 76ers have some dysfunction going on in their organization too. It's just a little more covered up right now just by the fact that they do have a team that is talented enough to at least compete and make a spot in the postseason.
Yeah, I do think the move to let Brett Brown go was the right decision. I really do. I don't even question that. So let's look at a couple potential candidates. We'll talk about Jason Kidd of the Lakers. Jason Kidd, not a really great run in with the Nets. Wasn't bad, but he still landed another job with the Bucks. With Giannis. What are your thoughts of him being a candidate for that job in Philly?
Well, I can understand why he would be a candidate for that job. He would be an ideal fit for someone like Ben Simmons, to say the least. Him being a legendary point guard in the game, going up against a guy that has all the talent and the tools to be a legendary point guard in the game. But how does that help Joel Embiid as well? You see, Scott, what I really believe when it comes down to these Sixers, and I know we're discussing the coaching candidates, you have to believe that at some point during this offseason, you're going to start hearing conversations of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons both being on the trade radar. The Sixers just choosing which offer is going to be better for them and holding on to that other star and building around them, because this dynamic doesn't work. And I don't know if there's a coach that can come in there right now and actually make it work at this point.
Okay, well, why don't we go on to the next candidate who also resides in L.A., Tyronn Lue with the Clippers. He has a championship pedigree, worked with LeBron James. I think of the two, if it were me, I would take Tyronn Lue instead of Jason Kidd. And I think Tyronn Lue's going to get one of these jobs anyways. It just depends on where he's going to get it. He can pick his next area code. What do you think about Tyronn Lue? Do you think he'd be a good fit in Philadelphia?
I believe he would be a good fit in Philadelphia, but once again, this all comes down to that front office and what they plan on doing with one of, if not both of those star players that they have right now. That's what I believe a lot of this coaching decision is going to come down to for these candidates. Do you know what the status of Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons is with the Sixers organization going into next season?
Yeah, I want to mention one thing I forgot to mention about Chris Paul, and I'm glad he did such great work in the bubble. I'll be anxious to see what he does with the racial injustice and all the causes that he's talked about outside. But God rest Chris Paul. What a fine player, and I became more and more impressed with what I saw, especially in the recent weeks, and how he willed the Oklahoma City to a near upset. Let's talk about another coach that I'm really hoping does get an opportunity. One would wonder if he ever does. This situation kind of reminds me a little bit years ago when Bob Brenly was let go by the Arizona Diamondbacks, and I was always wondering why he never got another head coaching job despite leading the Diamondbacks to a world title. It reminds me of that situation. What about Mark Jackson? I think the ideal place for Mark Jackson would be Indiana, where he had success with Reggie Miller. What are your thoughts about Mark Jackson landing somewhere else?
I believe the Indiana Pacers would be the best fit at this point, too. I was actually hoping that he would get that Brooklyn Nets job. And Kevin Durant actually did go to them and speak to them about wanting to hire Mark Jackson in that place, too. Obviously, we know they have Steve Nash now, and he signed off on that one as well. But I definitely would love to see Mark Jackson get another shot in this league again. He took that young Golden State Warriors core and he led them to the playoffs after years of not being there, and he matured them into what Steve Kerr then took them to the next step of being. So I'd like to see him get a shot to be a head coach in the league again, grow some young talent together, and grow them into a championship team.
Well, there are some good vacancies out there. So I mean, what do you have? The New Orleans job is still open, I believe. I don't think that one's been filled. But I'd like to see him in Indiana. And another thing that's always boggled my mind over the years as to why Brian Billick, formerly of the Ravens, never got an NFL head coaching job after he won a championship. So when you talk about guys that deserve second chances, I just mentioned three guys who I think should have. I hope that Jackson does get another opportunity. Lou is inevitable. He really is. Not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and where he decides to go.
Well, let me throw another candidate your way really quickly because his name is slowly on the radar, and that would be Sam Cassell. He's been an assistant coach under Doc Rivers since 2010 when he was still with the Celtics, and he moved with Doc all the way over to the Clippers. How do you feel about Sam Cassell potentially becoming the head coach in Philadelphia if that were to happen? And it should be noted that Sam Cassell and general manager Elton Brand do have a previous relationship in the game amongst each other. Sam Cassell and Elton Brand were teammates in 2006 with the Clippers, with that Clippers team that came very close to making the Western Conference Finals that year before falling short to the Phoenix Suns in Game 7. How do you feel about that?
Knowing what you've told me, it intrigues me. If there's a relationship, coaching vacancies get hired because of relationships. But I like the fact that Sam Cassell would be a good head coach anywhere given the right situation. It doesn't have to be Philadelphia. It could be anywhere. And I also think that Nate McMillan's going to land somewhere else too. I really do. So, yeah, I think Sam Cassell. But I still think ultimately Tyronn Lue would be the ideal fit for Philadelphia when the smoke is all said and clear. I want to go on to a couple things now that we have a little time to talk about it. You want to talk about the six-man award? Go ahead with the Clippers.
Yes, congratulations to Montrezl Harrell of the Los Angeles Clippers winning his first Six-Man of the Year award. Really a big piece on that team. At times, you could say that he's the third best player on that team, maybe even the fourth best player on that team at times. The Clippers have so much talent on that team with Kawhi Leonard, Paul George, Lou Williams, Montrezl Harrell. And it should be noted that Lou Williams actually came and presented the award to Montrezl Harrell today during the team meeting. And that's significant because Lou Williams is a reigning two-time NBA Six-Man of the Year award winner prior to succeeding that award over today to his teammate. So it's a big brother, little brother moment. Some very proud moments right now with the Clippers. And congratulations to Montrezl Harrell once again. And you're really happy for him with everything that he's been going through recently after the loss of his grandmother and everything like that.
Nick Beverly's back with the Clippers just in time, right?
This is definitely true, Scott, because Patrick Beverly, I couldn't even tell last night that he had a calf injury. He looked very explosive in that game last night. He looked explosive. Montrezl Harrell is back in shape. And this is one of the reasons I picked the Clippers as my favorite to come out of the Western Conference. Because they're loaded all the way around, but they have guys that have that dog mentality that you want guys to have this time of the year.
Well, that's fine. I'm still not sold on them. But I'll tell you what, any team that has Kawhi Leonard, to me, you can never say never, that's for sure. Now, one thing that we talked about in pre-production, you want to talk about Mike Malone. I actually worked with his dad, Brendan Malone, when I was working with the Pistons. And I had a great time working with Brendan Malone and Brendan Surr. So let's talk about Mike Malone being a little bit upset. And for obvious reasons in the bubble, the coaches are not allowed to have any family or friends. The players do. Why don't you explain that situation in more detail?
Yes, and I actually agree with Mike Malone on this, and I'll go ahead and I'll read off his quote. He said, "First, I'm going to say something that has nothing to do with your question." He said this to a reporter after being asked about Game 1 and the potential of what they expect in Game 2. But he went on to say, and I quote, "Today is day 60, all right? The guys that came down here on July 7th, and there weren't many of us because we were ravaged with COVID. This is the original crew. This is day number 60. The reason why I bring that up is because the players have their families here, which they deserve, which is the right thing to do. The referees are allowed to bring one guest, which is great for the referees. The coaches are not allowed to bring anybody." And he called out the NBA on this, and you know what, Scott? He deserves to call out the NBA on this. The NBA does need to be called out on this. Why do the players and the referees get to have someone come down in the bubble, but the coaches can't do it? And they're paying the ultimate sacrifice right now. They've been down there longer than anybody.
Yeah, I mean, he's 100% right. I guess one way the NBA can rectify it is let some of the family members come down and really rethink it. They've been able to think everything on the fly. And I got to tell you, though, I am impressed with the way the bubble has turned out for them. I am really pleasantly surprised the way it's worked out. And the players have done a good job, not only with their platform within the bubble, but the fact that they've managed to keep their social distancing to do the right thing so that this thing did not burst. So I think Mike Malone is 100% on target. No question about it. The NBA needs to rethink it, and they need to rethink it quickly. They can get it right here in the semifinals, and guess what? You still have the finals yet. So by all means. Anything else you want to add? You are listening to the Real and Rare WSAN Network. And just so you know, if you want to listen to the audio version of this broadcast, you can do so on Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Google Podcasts. And once again, I'll repeat that again. Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Google Podcasts. So, anything else you want to add to it? I think it's pretty interesting. I'm sure you might have a couple of other NBA notes before we wrap it up.
No, this is pretty much all I have for tonight. We're waiting for the Lakers and Rockets to tip off for game 1 of their series tonight. The Bucks and the Miami Heat are currently playing game 3 right now. Last I checked, the Milwaukee Bucks were leading that game at halftime, but they're not leading it by very much. So the Miami Heat can still very much win this game. But I'll go ahead and I'll echo your sentiments once again about the bubble. Kudos to the NBA, the coaches, the players, and everyone who's down there. They've done a very great job of protecting themselves, protecting each other. And we haven't heard about any COVID-19 positive tests coming out of there. And you just hope that that continues to go in that direction with the family members that are now being brought into the bubble and the guests that are now being brought into the bubble. You just hope that they can now continue to keep that under control.
We haven't spoken about the Boston Celtics, Toronto Raptors series, so we have about a minute to do before we wrap this broadcast up. Okay, I know that the Toronto Raptors were able to hit a last second shot to win it. Taco fell, I believe, it was 7-5, 7-6. On the inbounds, couldn't stop the pass, 5-10, all of a sudden the Raptors pull off the miracle. Are they a team of destiny, or are they just fortunate to escape with that win last night?
No, they were fortunate to escape with that win last night because, of course, if they lose that game, they go down 0-3 in that series, and the Celtics will probably more than likely sweep them. The Boston Celtics are the real deal. Jason Tatum's one of the top 20, top 25 players in the league right now. He's one of the top 5 players in the league right now. To me, that's under the age of 25. And what people have to remember with this Boston Celtics core is a lot of those young guys were on that Boston Celtics team in 2018 that took a LeBron James-led Cavaliers team to Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals before LeBron did what LeBron did for so many years in the Eastern Conference. Just dominated and shut the thing down and went to an 8th straight finals. But Jason Tatum is ready for this moment. Jaylen Brown's ready for this moment. Kemba Walker has been waiting for a moment like this. When he was in Charlotte, he only played in the playoffs twice because of the teams that were being built around him. But he is clearly built for this moment as well. Marcus Smart is really starting to grow on me. He's one of those players that I believe could have played in any era in the NBA just with his play style and the way that he plays. And you got to give it up to Brad Stevens and his staff for the job that they've done as well.
All right, well, as we wrap up the broadcast, let me give you our contact information here. If you want to follow me, you can do so at Tribune South on Twitter. That's at Tribune South. Facebook, South Florida Tribune, like the page. Instagram, South Florida Tribune, like the page. Yeah, obviously, you're going to see this video on the South Florida Tribune YouTube channel as well, and this will be uploaded to Facebook as well. And our website is www.southfloridatribune.com. You can find a lot of our writers as well as our media distribution partners in these broadcasts as well. And I've actually enjoyed the fact that I'm stepping up and writing a lot more myself. And of course, you can email us at southfloridatribune@gmail.com, and you can connect with me on LinkedIn, Scott Morganroth. What's your contact information before we wrap this bad boy up?
Yes, you can follow me on Twitter at XTMCKNIGHII. The 2 I's at the end are both capitalized. You can follow me on Instagram at XMCKNIGH22. You can send me a friend request and a follow request on Facebook and LinkedIn by typing in Xavier McKnight. You can also watch tonight's show and our previous show about hurricanes on my YouTube channel just by typing in Xavier McKnight.
Yeah, that was a good show. Like everyone that we always put together, I always enjoy working with you, and it's just such a really, really neat to be able to bring this thing and make it visual. And I think that as you and I continue to build our platform and our show, the real and the rare is becoming more real as you get to see us here. So my name is Scott Morgan, Roth Motor City Madmouth. That's Xavier McKnight. And you know what? It's been a great broadcast, Xavier. Any closing thoughts about COVID-19? You always like to end the show on that. Go ahead and do it.
Yes, as always, everyone, please continue to be vigilant, be responsible, and take COVID-19 very seriously. Wear your mask, put on your gloves, don't gather in large crowds. Let's do everything we can to take care of each other, because that's the only way we're going to push through this. And also, just on another closing note, our thoughts and our prayers and our best wishes go out to all the folks in Texas and Louisiana who are still dealing with the aftermath of Hurricane Laura. Really left some devastation in that area. We're praying that you all are able to pick up whatever it is that you have to do and clean up your communities in the best way possible. Praying for our people over in Belize who are dealing with Hurricane Nana right now. That hurricane came through last night. I haven't heard of any major disruption that it left, but it's still a hurricane nonetheless. And also, Scott, it's been a very tough week for us. We've lost a lot of people in the past 7 days, from Chadwick Boseman down to Tom Seaver, legendary Arizona men's basketball head coach Luke Olson, legendary Georgetown men's basketball head coach John Thompson Jr. It's been a very tough week. So everyone, give people their flowers while they're here. Don't be afraid to utter those magic 3 words to people, I love you, while they're still here, because once they're gone, and you can't say it to them anymore.
I'm glad you brought up Tom Seaver. Before we wrap this broadcast up, we had an incredible broadcast on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk last night with Stuart Hack and Rick Curdy. We did a tribute broadcast, and that's really great. So rest in peace, Tom, and to the other folks that you went ahead and mentioned as well, John Thompson, for whom I saw coach in the 1982 Final Four long before you ever knew what a transistor radio was. I got to kid around with you about the transistor radios. Come on. You can handle it, but at least you know about the Walkman. So, meanwhile, on behalf of Xavier McKnight, my name is Scott Morgan, Roth the Motor City Madmouth. Thank you for joining us tonight. You're on our YouTube channel. You'll see this video. And, of course, we look forward to doing another broadcast. I'm enjoying them more and more by the day. You get to see us. Once again, I'm Scott Morgan, Roth, and that's Xavier McKnight. And this is The Real and the Rare. Good night, everybody.